Okay, so a canner will hold 7 quarts of tomatoes. So what we need to do that is obviously 7 quart jars. You need about 17 pounds of tomatoes. These are aroma type. You need 7 rings as well as 7 flats to go on your 7 jars. You need a little saucepan to simmer your flats. You need a tongs to take your flats out of the water to put them on the jars later. Okay, first of all we're going to be blanching the tomatoes, which means we put them in hot boiling water, almost boiling, which is here, for 1 minute, which will make the skin slip off. We have a basket to put our tomatoes in the water. After they've been in the water for 1 minute, we will put them into a sink of cold water, and from there we'll peel them. So we'll need a pan to put the peelings in, a sharp pointy knife, and also we'll need a spoon with a round smooth handle, and I'll show you what that's for in a little bit. Okay, so here's our canner. I've already got a canner full going here, which is there, you can see, boiling. So I'm going to show you how to go from 17 pounds of fresh tomatoes to a canner full of canned tomatoes. So first things first, we're going to blanch. Now I like to get all my blanching done to start with before I ever start peeling tomatoes, and so I just go ahead and get all my tomatoes blanched. I put 8 or 10, 12, however many will fit in my basket. Since my water's not quite boiling, I'm not going to really pile these up in here. Okay, I put them in my basket in the hot water, and it's not rocket science. You want it to be in there for at least a minute. You don't want it to go a lot over a minute, but if you miss it by a few seconds or 15, it's not the end of the world. So we're going to let these tomatoes sit in here, and you might be able to see, I kind of bounce them in the basket every now and then just to kind of move them around, make sure all the surfaces are in contact with the hot water for at least most of the time. And what you'll be able to see, the skins, some of them will actually split, and they'll become very easy to slip off, which is a whole lot better than trying to peel a tomato that hasn't been blanched. And let me take a look here. Yeah, there. Okay, I can see the skin right there on that big tomato, how it has split open. So I know that those have been in there long enough for my skins to be starting to slip off. Okay, so I put them in the cold water, and then I go back over here, reload my basket. Now because you can see some of these tomatoes are kind of dirty, but because I know that they're going in a pan of hot water and then they're going in a sink of cold water, and I'm slipping the skins off over there, I don't worry too much about washing them before I go through that process. Okay, so I've got another pan of tomatoes, another basket of tomatoes in my hot water to blanch. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to turn the tape off because I'm going to go ahead and go through and get all this box of tomatoes blanched, and then show you what comes next. So you can see the tomatoes, the skins are really slippy on some of them. I start by putting the sharp knife in and getting the core out. I use my finger to limit the depth that my knife goes into the tomato. Okay, and then I just peel the skin off, use the knife and my thumb to kind of pull it off like that. Okay, then I kind of flip the tomato around, and anything I don't like the looks of, I cut off. I quarter it. Uh-oh, I don't have a jar sitting here. I quarter it. And drop it in a jar. Okay. Now, some of the tomatoes, like this one, you can't see the skin's not cracked anywhere, but when I go ahead and start peeling it, you can see that it is still really loose. Now there was a little spot there, I don't know what that was, so I'm going to kind of go under it Make sure it's not a major blemish. I don't like this white stuff that's at the tops of them sometimes, so I'll trim that off. Just get all that skin off. A little blossom in. Okay, here's where using that plastic spoon comes in. You see that there's airspace in between the tomatoes down in there. And you really want to get your tomatoes pushed in really well with your fingers. But then, this way. See what I'm doing while I'm doing it with two hands. Okay, you want to push the tomatoes in with one hand, but then shove the spoon handle down in the jar at the same time that you're pushing. Okay, once all our tomatoes are in our jars, the next thing to do is to thoroughly wipe the rims, because you can't have any bit of debris on the top edge of your jar or your lid will not seal. You want to get each of your jars. I would take each jar, hold it in one hand, go around the rim, and I would do that twice. I would get a new edge to my cloth and then make sure and go around the very top edge of that again very thoroughly. Okay? Then next, I've actually got all these jars already wiped, so the next thing to do is to take your tongs, grab a lid that's been simmering, shake the water off of it, and set it on each of your jars. So over here to my left, you can probably hear I've got my water heating already. I want that to be warm, quite warm, on its way to boiling. And that will actually take 30 or 45 minutes to get it back to boiling once all the jars are put in it. Okay, so I've got a flat on each of my jars. I'm just going to center each of those, and then the next thing is to put the rings on. I think I've got 7 of them there. And then you put a ring on each jar, and you tighten it to what's called finger tight. Now I'm actually going to, let's do it this way. You hold the jar and tighten it just as tight as you can with your fingers. You're not, okay, that one, you see what's happening here? I have reused a jar, and so my ring is not working on them. I have to put those in a more standard jar. Be sure that your rings are on each jar. Okay, so I've got all my rings and lids on my jars. I'm ready to put them into my hot water bath. So I just very carefully set them in. Now right now, my water level is not too deep for me to put these in by hand, but I think probably with the next jar, I don't want to risk the hot water coming up over my fingers. So now I'm going to use my handy little jar lifter thing. I love this little thing. Holds the jars and picks them up and sets them in. Okay, I've got all 7 of my jars in my canner, so now all that's left to do is put the lid on it, and I'll come and check it every 10 or 15 minutes, maybe not, probably every 10 minutes, and to see if it's boiling. Okay, and the very last thing you want to do before you put your jars away, after they've cooled completely, you want to take the rings off, and that's very, very important, I have learned, because tomato juice is very acidic, and if you leave the rings on, say it's 6 months before you open this jar of tomatoes and there's tomato juice in underneath that ring, which there inevitably will be, the rings will rust on and they will be nearly impossible to get off. So once your jars have cooled completely, it's actually the next day after I canned these, you want to take your rings off, wipe your jars down good, and then put them away. You can use a Sharpie marker to write on the tops, you know, whatever you want to identify them, if you put the year or what they are, if you've seasoned them, if you've put salt in them or not. I hope you've enjoyed this video on how to can tomatoes, and I hope you'll subscribe to my channel for more videos in the future. Thanks for watching, and happy canning.